zon mauga ntona yirao enye teacher akbenya ganye aka. This teaching is on ancestral spirits or Togba Ngolio as perceived and thought by the native Anglo Eʋes of Ghana, West Africa. By the end of this teaching, you should understand why the Anglo Eʋes give particular attention to ancestral reverence. Please bear in mind that the concept of ancestral reverence is closely linked with the concept of the soul. The entire teaching comes in 3 parts. In part 1, I will be discussing Chiefe, which is the same as the land of souls, the spirit world, or the ancestral world. In part 2, I will look at KUGBE, which means visible world, or the physical world, or the real world in which we live in. In part 3, I will discuss KUGBE, which means the day of death. In the process of arriving at KUGBE, I will discuss these 3 channels. Ele ado akujeji, which means possessed by death. Ele kubaji, that means in deathbed. Akudofom, that is closer to death. According to the native Anglo Eʋes, in the spirit world, a person has parents or guardians, siblings, spouse, and children. They went on to say, for the person to migrate from the spirit world to the visible world, the person selects his or her mother. The person is escorted by an elderly person towards 2 large oak trees, known in Eʋes as Adido or Amatio, the main branches of which serve the function of gates separating the spirit world from the visible world. The branches open and lock up periodically. It is an ill omen to arrive before a closed gate. Stillbirths and infant mortality are the unfortunate result of arriving before a closed gate. The native Eʋes further tells us that at the time of conception, 2 souls, or better still, 2 components of a soul, one connected with life, the other connected with death, both of these souls unite. The life soul comes from Mau, the death soul comes from the land of souls, which in Eʋes we call Chiefe. So basically, the 2 components of a soul, life soul comes from Mau, the death soul comes from the land of the souls, which is Chiefe. Both of these souls unite. So at birth, the person may be received with celebration, especially if it is believed the reincarnation of one of the ancestors. The person reincarnated is normally identifiable with that elderly person of the spirit world who had escorted the individual towards the 2 large oak trees, or Adido or Amatio, the gates of the spirit world. The same elderly person may act as an escort to 2 or more, and this explains why the same person may be reincarnated by two or more persons. The natives went on to point out some signs of reincarnated soul. For example, speech, empathy, birthmarks, resemblance, love or great affinity for a certain culture, body language, even the eyes, curiosity, mannerism, all physical attributes, or the way the person laughs, even the day, the month, the year of day of birth. All of these are attributes and many more which the native Eʋes have pointed out as attributes or signs of reincarnated soul or ancestor. The native Eʋes went on to say that in situations where there are no visible identification marks of a reincarnated ancestor, the Boko or diviners are consulted. The native Anglo Eʋes tells us that the person is living in the visible world or KUGBE, and that person is living a full life, and all of a sudden he or she is possessed by death or a kujeji. Before the person dies, the first thing he or she may get is a premonition, and that means that the person knows that he or she is going to die. So before the person consults a boko or diviner, he or she might find out in a dream, maybe it suddenly comes to the person that he or she is going to die. They say few weeks before the person dies, he or she gets deathbed visitors. Now, what is the deathbed visitors? They are relatives who come to the person. They do this in a specific way. They may stand outside the room in which the person is dying. They may come into the room in which the person is dying, or they may come into the room and talk to the person, or some will stand at the bedside and talk to the person. These people include mother, father, brothers, and sisters. The visitors might include spiritual beings that wait outside the room or may come to the door. According to the Anglo Eʋes, at this point, the person begins to relinquish or give up all worldly attachments. This could be in the form of verbal messages or written messages. The native Anglo Eʋes went on to reveal that the moment the person realizes the day of death has come, it comes so hard that the person will have no control. The person suddenly is in a difficult position. So at this point, the person has to finally give up everything in the visible world, also known as KUGBE. This is absolutely fundamental. The fact is that the person will not continue living in the visible world or KUGBE forever. The dying person has to give up his or her wife, husband, relatives, cars, including all worldly assets, as well as the deities, any cultural and social associations. If the person does not give up these things, he or she remains attached. Now, attachment is the most difficult thing when the person is dying. If the person can give up everything, he or she could have a very smooth transition by going closer and closer to the spirit world or chamber until the person has lost his or her ego or false identity. The person has lost that part of him or herself which created the differentiation. If the person doesn't give up all the worldly attachments, then the person will have a very difficult time dying. In this case, the person will have spiritual restlessness. That means the person is being pulled back by the worldly attachments or by the worldly attachments in the visible world. Finally, the native Anglo Eʋes tells us that once the person has given up everything and lost the ego or false identity, he or she merges with the universe. All what is remained with the person is a lifeless body on a bed, in a casket or body bag. At this point, it is only the non-dual or the ka, what the Evrers call the ka, that is emerging with the greater cosmos behind. The person won't carry worldly attachments there when they go to the universe or become one with the universe, because he or she was not born with any. At death and in the process of the non-dual or the ka merging with the greater cosmos behind, there is a permanent separation when the part of the soul connected with life becomes universal. It goes to Ma'u, and the other, which is the deaf soul, goes to Chefa or the land of soul or the spirit world or the ancestral world, but not until after a period of 41 days, during which period the soul reveals itself to members of the lineage group. This revelation is always very specific. It could be a visit to a relative who could not visit during deathbed. This could be a feeling that someone is dying and that they need help, or it could be a narrative dream. A kudre, makudre banovinya kukum. So in conclusion, the native Anglo Evrers emphasize that if the person does not give up all the things to which he or she is attached, the person will have a tough time in the return process, because there will be a battle between the visible world that is pulling back the person and the spiritual world that is dragging the person away. So in essence, what that means is that the person came with no attachments and will return with no attachments. It becomes difficult for the person if he or she does not give up all attachments in the return process. My beloved, please consider this schema here. So this is the person. You have life, in Eʋes known as KUGBE, and you have death, which is called Ku. This is the visible world called KUGBE. You've lived your life and you have so many hichamanu attachments, and one day when you passed away, your soul will split into two, and one, the life, goes to the greater cosmos called Ma'u, and the other, which is Ku, goes back to Chefa. Thank you very much. And that is the reason why the native Anglo Evrers still reveres their ancestors, because they believe the deaf soul goes back to Chefa. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.